Good morning everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Right, today we are in a tiny little village, somewhere in Suffolk, somewhere out in the sticks, and we're looking for a quite remarkable woman today, and her name is Violet Jessop. Right, Violet Jessop, she's not exactly what you'd call a household name, but when you hear her story, you'll understand why I'm here today. I found her on the internet while I was doing some research on something else, and I thought she's got such a remarkable story, it's worth telling. And her final resting place isn't too far away from another final resting place I was going to be doing anyway, so I thought, why not? Unfortunately, the weather today is absolutely appalling. It stopped raining temporarily, but all the way up here it's been raining, and it's been a good hour and a half drive to get here, and it's been raining most of the way, and when I pulled up here it was also still raining, so I had to sit in the car for 10 minutes. Anyway, enough said. I'll tell you a little bit about Violet Jessop, and we'll have a look around this lovely little cemetery. It's a cemetery, there's no church here, it's a very small cemetery. But we'll have a look around this little cemetery while I tell you a little bit about Violet Florence Jessop.
Violet Constance Jessop was an Argentine woman of Irish heritage who worked as an ocean liner stewardess and nurse in the early 20th century. Jessop is most well known for having survived the sinking of both the RMS Titanic in 1912 and her sister ship, the HMHS Brittanic, in 1916, as well as having been on board the eldest of the three sister ships, the RMS Olympic, when it collided with the British warship HMS Hawke in 1911. Born on 2nd of October 1887 near Bahia Blanca, Argentina, Violet Constance Jessop was the oldest daughter of Irish immigrants William and Catherine Jessop. She was the first of 9 children, 6 of whom survived. Jessop spent much of her childhood caring for her youngest siblings. She became very ill as a child with what is presumed to have been tuberculosis, which she survived despite doctors' predictions that her illness would be fatal. When Jessop was 16 years old, her father died of complications from surgery, and her family moved to England, where she attended a convent school and cared for her youngest sister while her mother was at sea working as a stewardess. When her mother became ill, Jessop left school and, following in her mother's footsteps, applied to be a stewardess. Jessop had to dress down to make herself less attractive to be hired. At age 21, her first stewardess position was with Royal Mail Line on board Orinoco in 1908. In 1911, Jessop began working as a stewardess for the White Star liner RMS Olympic. Olympic was a luxury ship that was the largest civilian liner at that time. Jessop was on board on the 20th of September 1911 when Olympic left from Southampton and collided with the British warship HMS Hawke. There were no fatalities, and despite damage, the ship was able to make it back to port without sinking. Jessop chose not to discuss this collision in her memoirs. She continued to work on Olympic until April 1912, when she was transferred to sister ship Titanic. Jessop boarded RMS Titanic as a stewardess on the 10th of April 1912 at age 24. 4 days later, on the 14th of April, it struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sank about 2 hours and 40 minutes after the collision. Jessop described in her memoirs how she was ordered up on deck to serve as an example of how to behave for the non-English speakers who could not follow the instructions given to them. She watched as the crew loaded the lifeboats. She was later ordered into lifeboat 16, and as the boat was being lowered, one of Titanic's officers gave her a baby to look after. The next morning, Jessop and the rest of the survivors were rescued by the RMS Carpathia and taken to New York City on April 18th. According to Jessop, while on board Carpathia, a woman, presumably the baby's mother, grabbed the baby she was holding and ran off crying without saying a word. After arriving in New York City, she later returned to Southampton. In the First World War, Jessop was a stewardess for the British Red Cross. On the morning of the 21st of November 1916, she was aboard HMHS Brittanic, the younger sister ship of Olympic and Titanic that had been converted into a hospital ship when it sank in the Aegean Sea after an unexplained explosion. Brittanic sank within 55 minutes, killing 30 of the 1,066 people on board. British authorities hypothesized that the ship had either been struck by a torpedo or had hit a mine planted by German forces. Conspiracy theories have been circulated that suggest the British were responsible for sinking their own ship. In a major diving expedition on the wreck in 2016, however, it was determined that the ship had struck a deep-sea mine. This was shown in a documentary film of that dive, The Mystery of the Brittanic. While Brittanic was sinking, Jessop and other passengers were nearly killed by the ship's propellers that were shredding lifeboats that collided with the propellers. Jessop had to jump out of a lifeboat, resulting in a traumatic head injury which she survived. In her memoirs, she described the scene she witnessed as Brittanic went under. The white pride of the ocean's medical world dipped her head and a little, then a little lower and still lower. All the deck machinery fell into the sea like child's toys. Then she took a fearful plunge, her stem rearing hundreds of feet into the air until with a final roar she disappeared into the depths. Arthur John Priest and Archie Jewell, two other survivors of the Titanic, were also on board and both survived. Jessop returned to work for White Star Line in 1920 before joining Red Star Line and then Royal Mail Line again. During her tenure with Red Star, Jessop went on 2 cruises around the world on the company's largest ship, Belgenland. When Jessop was 36, she married John James Lewis, a fellow White Star Line steward. Lewis had served aboard the Olympic and the RMS Majestic. They divorced around a year later. In 1950, she retired to Great Ashfield, Suffolk. Years after her retirement, Jessop claimed to have received a telephone call on a stormy night from a woman who asked Jessop if she had saved a baby on the night that the Titanic sank. Yes, Jessop replied. The voice then said, "I was that baby," laughed and hung up. Her friend and biographer, John Maxton Graham, said it was most likely some children in the village playing a joke on her. She replied, "No, John, I had never told that story to anyone before I told you now." Records indicate that the only baby on Lifeboat 16 was Assad Thomas, who was handed to Edwina Trout and later reunited with his mother on Carpathia. Sadly, Violet Jessop passed away of congestive heart failure in 1971 at the age of 83. She has been laid to rest at the Hartest Cemetery just outside of Ipswich, which is where we are today.
Well, that's the story of Violet Jessop. As you can see by what I said earlier, totally remarkable woman. Now, I don't know whether she was the luckiest woman to ever live or the unluckiest. Unlucky because of the ship she was getting on, or seemed to sink or get badly damaged. Or lucky because she managed to survive them all. All I know for sure is if I was on a ship and I saw her walking up the gangplank, I'd be off that ship a bit lively. But anyway, we are very close to her resting place now, so let's go and have a look together. Right, her resting place is just over here. It's a beautiful little cemetery though. It is literally out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you listen. Just listen to that. Wood pigeons, starlings, other morning songbirds. But anyway, we're not here for that. We are here for this. For this is the final resting place of Violet Constance Jessop, beloved sister who died 5th of May 1971 in her 84th year. What does it say? Fortified by rites of Holy Mother Church, on her soul, sweet Jesus, have mercy. that is the final resting place of Violet Constance Jessop. And what I'll do is I'll put my little river polished pebble there. Remarkable woman. And right next to her here is Eileen Margaret Meehan, beloved wife and mother, is basically Violet's sister, and her brother-in-law also buried here, right next to her. So they're all back together again. Well, there you go. That's the final resting place of Violet Constance Jessop. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave it a thumbs up and maybe consider subscribing. It is free. All subscriptions are free on YouTube. So, and don't forget to hit that notification bell. Right, well that is it. I've got to go and do another one now. This one I found while I was totally researching something completely different. And now I'm going to head off and do what I was going to be doing today. So I will see you on the next one, wherever I am. So until then, bye bye for now.